Hi there, everyone. This is Dr. Y. I am doing a recap from Friday's Rutgers Fellows presentation on problem solving, and this is specific to framing. And framing is probably one of the most important skills for problem solving, to make sure that we're asking the right question and that we've got that right question. Framing is also important to another critical thing, especially in the consulting world, which is to scope out a project properly, because we need to make sure we're looking at the same frame and we're defining the frame by which we as a team work on, but also that we're framing it appropriate for our client. The use of the frame is critical life skill. It helps you in terms of managing expectations, both in terms of your client and your management, as well as your subordinates, but also in life with your family and your kids, and your spouse most importantly. Okay, so let's get moving along about framing. Now, I'm going to quote one of my professors from business school, Joel Rubin. He taught a great course, which was basically leadership and decision making. And a quote that just stands with me is, "The individual who controls the frame controls the meeting, the agenda, the decisions, and the outcomes." And I think that Professor Rubin, being that he graduated from Yale, Columbia, and from Booth, as well as being a Booz Allen consultant, might know a thing or two. So one of the things is keep that in mind as you manage a meeting. How you control your frame can make a difference in terms of what the outcome is. I know this from using it in market research. When I tee up my market research in terms of my one-on-ones, when I frame things appropriately, I'm able to get people focused in on what needs to be done. So let's use an example. What would you choose here? As you look at this, you have an outbreak of an unusual Asian disease, expected to kill 600 people. 2 alternative programs to combat the disease are proposed. Assume exact scientific estimate of the consequences are as shown below. Which would you favor, A or B? Okay, most people will actually go for A because it's definitive. See how it's definitive, where B is a little bit more, it's not very clear. But if we flip to C and D, where you know that 400 is going to die versus there's, 1/3 probably no one will die, 2 that a third that it shows there's a little more hope, especially when you have negative data. We throw them all together. What we find is, if we look at the different frames, is in essence most people will opt for A because it's very definitive and very positive. So the way you tee it up, and lawyers do this, politicians do this, and good managers really do this well, is the way you tee it up can drive the direction of where the perceived outcomes should be. So what is a frame? Let's get into what a frame is. Okay? And I'm going to talk through an elevator example that was in a Harvard Business Review article by Weddell Wellsberg, and it was titled, "Are You Solving the Right Problems?" Okay? And a little elevator example, which in this article, what was great is they had an elevator example where we all know elevators sometimes they're too long. And in this one scenario, the perception was that it took too long. So there were complaints about it. And maybe what we should do is fix the elevator, which is the automatic thing that folks do. If they get a problem, they let's go to a solution and fix it. And that's something that's been programmed because of, one, autonomous thinking. Second of all, is a lot of managers, don't bring me your problems, bring me your solutions. Okay? But sometimes your solutions are very expensive. In this case, this is a very expensive. If you reframed the problem, which was more of a queuing problem, where the wait is annoying and we hate waiting in our lines, what can we do to obviate the problem of waiting? Okay, so make the wait feel shorter. So have you ever noticed in terms of elevators how they do have mirrors, or they have maybe a hand sanitizer or something to distract you? Benihana, one of the famous Japanese food chains, used to do that by moving people over into the bar, giving them a drink and some appetizers, while it may take 20 or 30 more minutes to get them seated at the table. But occupying that time now makes the perception of waiting less painful. The second problem that was presented in this article was the pet adoption problem. And in this, basically, the issue was the shelters that are in Los Angeles, a lot of emphasis and money was about adopting out. But yet there were a number, maybe about 50% of the pets were cycling back in. So realistically, the problem was not necessarily an adoption out, but was a return problem. Think about that in e-commerce. Think about that in just, a department store where you have returns. So one of the key questions was raised when people brought their dogs back is, do you really, would you like to really keep your dog? And they found most of the people wanted to keep their dog. This is, well, what's holding you back? And when digging found out that it was because of economic conditions, or maybe it was, an apartment where they didn't allow animals. So what happened was that they ended up going out and finding ways to help address the problem, to be able to hold, so the owners would be able to hold on to their animals. So dealing with, instead of the outflow issue, which was costing them, I think it was like $80 per placement, they got it down because they addressed a different problem, which was this return issue, down into $60. Okay? In terms of returning a rescue or sheltered dog. And they did a lot of education of families around that, as well as a great little book that came out, First Home, Forever Home. Okay? So this is something that, by reframing a problem, they save money and they have better outcomes. So in this article, we talked about several practices that are for effective reframing. And the author talked about, that you don't have to use them all. But these are very important to start thinking about in terms of establish legitimacy. Just in providing this article around the organization and get a discussion, it's important to have legitimacy too, that we need to ask the right question. And ideally, if you can get senior management behind it, it's a recognition that really to solve a problem, we have to have the right questions out there. And then also bring outsiders to discussion so that you have someone who can be the devil's advocate or raise an issue. So in this case, they had a secretary who was with them for 12 years and raised an issue about, you guys constantly talk about innovation with every group of managers that are there, but don't do anything. But they recognized that they had to do more bottom-up involvement in terms of getting innovation. The other thing is people talk a lot, but they don't put things in writing. When people have to put things in writing and then be able to compare in writing, this is where you get things moving along. Because putting it helps you and forces you to coalesce your idea and really make it very tight. Also to that is you need to ask what's missing. And then you might want to consider as you are looking at this, what type of category does this problem fit? Is it a sales problem? Is it a return problem? Is it an operations problem? And then sometimes it's good, we focus on the negative in a problem, but maybe sometimes what you have to do is ask about, positive exceptions and what can we learn from that. And last but not least is questioning the objective. What is the objective in the process? Okay? And sometimes the most important and challenging, believe it or not, is just establishing legitimacy to the process. Another article that is, I think, very useful deals with Nelson Repenning's article, which is the most underrated skill in management, which really is a tee-up to the A3 problem-solving process and tool. But there are few management skills more powerful than the discipline of clearly articulating the problem. You seek to solve before jumping into action. And, Repenning went further to talk about System 1 and System 2, thinking, autonomous thinking versus really laid out, cogent, cognitive thinking processes. So what were the three key findings that Repenning pointed out in this? 1, articulate a clear statement of the problem you are trying to solve before initiating the changes. Very, very critical. And then break those big problems into a series of smaller ones that can be easily tracked and tackled. And then follow a structured approach and problem solution using the A3 form, which was originally developed by Toyota Motor Corporation as part of the Toyota production principles. So anyway, which resonated and why? Well, probably most importantly, I think the clear statement of the problem is critical, as well as breaking things down. A3 is pretty good too. I'm not going to cover A3, but what makes for a good problem statement? Okay, and this is critical. And this was something that we worked on exercise with the fellows over on Friday, and it's 1, do you care about it? Does the organization care about it? Is it something that people are really going to get behind? And then you look at present state and the ideal state. and look at what the gap is that is there. And try to quantify those variables, okay? And then try to stay away from a diagnosis solution. In fact, when I work with many MBAs, I found that they gravitate to a solution. And last but not least, break it down so it's small enough to tackle. If you get this thing right, guess what? If you can take these processes, you see this problem solving sometimes, some people think it's like a dog chasing its tail, okay, as you see this guy. But realistically, if you work hard at the process of a you actually can get yourself out of trouble and be able to, by addressing what the right questions are, using a problem statement, be able to get yourself out of that, in this case, this hole. All right, take care, have a great day.